A dweeb. And what's Helen Nearing up to in her life after Scott? Good evening. I'm Bill Misley. Welcome once again to Vantage Point. Well, now that the last Christmas card has made it through the mails and the 12 days of Christmas are over, the only reminder of last month will be dried up pine cones that'll keep showing up in corners till July. Other than that, it's January. The gods today stand friendly, that we may, lovers in peace, lead on our days to age. This could have been a blessing under which Helen and Scott Nearing left the city in 1932, in the heart of the Great Depression, to live out their lives in mutual support of each other and their ideals, which were lost in the times. 4.5 years ago, a few days after his 100th birthday, Scott died in their home in Harborside, Maine. Helen Nearing continues on there, alone, but filled with her own sense of peace and future. Helen Nearing, her life after Scott.
Well, up with the birds in between 5 and 6. Make the fires, look at what the weather will be like, decide to be outdoors when it's good weather and indoors when it's bad weather. Do my correspondence and fill book orders. Usually tend to the details like that in the morning. And then I'm out in the garden. I plant, or I harvest, or I weed, or I see people, and go early to bed, not quite with the birds, but when any good music on radio is over. We never had a radio before when Scott was around. He didn't like the noises that issued from it, but I missed music. So good classical concerts I listen to in the evening.
Scott and Helen spent their lives together working very close to the earth and very far from money.
We don't owe anybody a nickel. We don't borrow any money. We don't pay any interest. And we prefer to pay as we go and wish the bankers would find useful occupations for themselves. And
though she's in her 80s, Helen Nearing grows most of her own food as she and Scott did for so many years together, organically and intensively.
Isn't that pretty? Flowering chard. Got first prize with one twice as big as this at the Blue Hill Fair. That a nice bouquet. People have come and looked at the place and said it looks more or less the way when Scott was here. Not your compost piles. His were very tidy. His were meticulous. Mine are effective, but not as regular and perfect as his was. Look, here's a flower. Still growing. That's pretty perky. Isn't that nice? That flower. And here's next year's compost. Good soil. That's what builds the garden. Seaweed, we put sawdust, we put weeds. No manure. Just what comes to the garden, what comes in the place.
They built their home when she was in her 70s and he in his 90s.
I like building with stone. I like picking up stone, and I have an eye for stone, and we don't cut any stone. I picked them up from the beach or the road or the woods, and I laid every one, and Scott did all the mixing of the concrete in a wheelbarrow, but I wouldn't let anybody else touch a stone. I wanted to have the fun of doing it all myself. So we did it together, all the stonework. It took 3 summers. We did it slowly. We didn't rush at it. We didn't push. We did the outhouse first, and then we did the woodshed and garage, and then we did the house. Then we did the garden wall, and then we did the greenhouse. In all, it took maybe 5 parts of 5 years. But it's there for more than 5 years. It's probably there for 500, I hope.
Back in the early part of the century, Scott became a radical, committed to making a better world for those he saw being oppressed and exploited by the powerful. His views got him fired from his job as professor of economics at the University of Pennsylvania, and he went to the University of Toledo.
They took him on as professor of sociology and economics, and the First World War came along, and Scott became a pacifist. And he believed that the war had a commercial reason for being, and he did not go along with it. And the university couldn't take that. So for being a pacifist and being and talking against the war, he was out of that university. And no college would ever touch him. From then on, he was blackballed.
Helen sees their pacifism and vegetarianism as interconnected paths.
It seems joined together. If you don't want to kill people, you don't want to kill animals. If you don't want to kill animals, so I kill people. And obviously, we both of us have lived long and healthy lives without doctors into our, in his case, into his hundreds, and mine into my 80s. We've not had doctors, and we've not been ill, and we've been able to be strong enough to carry on our work.
Scott and Helen devoted their lives together to being a resource for others to learn that frugality, simplicity, and hard work are the bedrock of the good life. Their homes have been a mecca for alternative lifestyle advocates for years.
People still continue to drop in, even though Scott is not here. I have many visitors during the day, some announced and some unannounced, and I see them as part of my social work. I could live quite happily alone, but I enjoy people too.
When Scott died, Helen was faced with being really alone for the first time in her life.
I don't remember really after he left. I certainly must have missed him, and I missed his physical help around the place, but it's sort of a blank to me for about a half a year. And then I start to remember again. I was glad for him. He'd had a long and a thoroughly interesting life. He'd contributed a great deal. He'd gotten a great deal out of life. And he, as I, was interested in what happens after death. And he went decisively and dedicatedly into that good night. He stopped eating. He was sitting at the table with us here and said, "I think I'll stop eating now." And I agreed, I understood, I complied, and I sped him on his way. He only got juices for a month, and then he went on water for a week, and he just quietly faded away. There was no pain, no doctors, no pills, no medicines. He just decided it was time to go, and go he did. I think that's a respectable on the way out, and cheerfully on the way out. I look forward to an ending of a long and a worthwhile and an interesting, even a pleasant and happy life. I believe in reincarnation. I think I came from somewhere and I'm going somewhere, and that there can be a point and purpose in my life, and I gladly go along with it.
Helen and Scott nearing. We couldn't think of a better way to begin a new year. Thank you for joining us. That's Vantage Point. We'll see you next month.